You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Have you ever thought about what would happen if your airline window popped out? Or if you could build a jetpack using only machine guns? Turns out you can, but you really shouldn't. Hi, I'm Jill Chacha, host of a podcast that's for weird people who like learning about weird stuff. It's called Well, That's Interesting, and it's a comedy science-y show that tells the story behind the facts because, as it turns out, those stories are funny. The facts are bizarre, the stories are epic, and the laughter is plentiful. So, join the flock and listen to Well, That's Interesting wherever you do podcasts.
Hey y'all, spooky season is here, and if you're looking for a show to whet your appetite for a little haunted history, then I'd like to invite you to check out Southern Gothic, a chart-topping history podcast that explores some of the most infamous legends, folklore, ghost stories, and hauntings of the American South. We've covered all sorts of stuff from the Bell Witch of Tennessee to the disappearance of the Confederate submarine, the H.L. Hunley. Not to mention our deep dives into the local lore of some of America's oldest and most haunted cities, like New Orleans, Charleston, and St. Augustine. So, if you're ready for a little good old-fashioned Halloween storytelling with a commitment to quality historical research, then be sure to check out Southern Gothic today. It's available now on all your favorite podcast apps.
Hello, delicious friends, and welcome to Who Did What Now, the history podcast that's not your history class, with me, your host, Katie Charlwood, history harlot and reader of books. Hi, everybody, I've got a secret. Well, technically, I've got two secrets. I mean, I feel like technically I have more than two secrets, but like I have two official secrets, which feels like enough, frankly. One of which I have been embargoed on. I've been embargoed. Like, I think that's when you know you're making it in the world, when you get embargoed by stuff. And I've just got like things happening behind the scenes that are very exciting and I really want to talk about, but obviously I'm not allowed to. So there's that. And so there's stuff happening, and I'm really bad at keeping people informed of stuff. So I've decided, I was convinced, cajoled, perhaps coerced into starting a newsletter. And so that is happening. You're welcome. It's going to be monthly. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Like, it's monthly, because I'm not going to do any more than that, am I? Absolutely not. Not a hope in hell, because I'm already too busy. You know what I mean? I'm already struggling. Because I can't help but bite off more than I can chew. It's been a busy weekend. Like, it was my wee girl's birthday, and so we had like a big birthday party, and then we went to like a big cinema thing, and then the fun fair, and there was just a lot. It was a lot, and then we had football practice, and then she got picked for like some team, because of course she did, because apparently we cannot do anything by halves in this family, so here we are. And yeah, this is the situation I found myself in. So yes, it's been a bit much, and I have so many things to get on board with and so many things to just like finish. But the good thing is, as someone with ADHD, I thrive under pressure, you know, like diamonds. Coal becomes diamonds and other such things. I mean, it goes from being something really useful to being something really pretty. So I feel like the opposite of that. That's a weird one. But yeah, it's been such an interesting, wild couple of weeks. It's going to be good to like share stuff with you. And I am working on trying to get a Belfast gig happening. I know people have been asking me for it, and they've been going on about it, and I'm working on it. I'm working on it because I have so much going on in the second half of the year that I'm trying, and I've got shit to hit and stuff to do. But anyway, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, quit your jibber jabber and fact me. In fact, you I will. But first, we've got to get our source on. Our sources are Famous Impostors by Bram Stoker. Blackmail, Scandal and Revolution by Simon Burrows. The Sword of the Chevaliere by Guy Adams. The Strange Case of the Chevalier Dion de Beaumont by John Buchan Telfair. Monsieur Dion is a Woman, a tale of political intrigue and sexual masquerade by Gary Cates. And we have basically unfinished memoirs. We've got unfinished memoirs of the Chevalier Dion. So we've got memoirs, letters, correspondence, a bunch of stuff that got translated, and nevertheless, our favourites, history.com and biography.com. Are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then let's begin. So you may be thinking to yourself, Katie, I know it's Pride Month, but are you seriously working through the LGBTQIA in no particular order? It appears so, motherfuckers. It wasn't my intention to go through everybody, but there are so many interesting people from history that we don't discuss. And I had a list. And then I noticed that people on my list happened to, correlate with particular letters in the alphabet mafia. And I thought, well, why not? So last week we had Sir Isaac Newton, who shows you, you really can do a lot and achieve so many things when you're not too busy thinking about shagging. So that was the most famous asexual in history, to my knowledge. I'd have to look it up, but I think so. And so this week, I wanted to talk about the Chevalier Dion. I would like to apologise for the horrific butchering of French that's going to happen throughout this episode. But Dion was a trans spy. It's very complicated, which I will tell you, but they don't transition till much later in life. And it becomes very much a complicated situation. But I am going to refer to them as they throughout this story for the most part, just because they took so long to transition in life. If I were to use he instead of she, and it just feels not only incorrect, but very misgendery and very rude. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use they, them, because it just feels more respectful. And again, I want to apologise for my absolute, just awful French you're going to hear. So let's start from the beginning, shall we? Dion was born Charles Geneviève Louis Auguste André Timothée Dion de Beaumont. Because French people have to have all of the names, too many names some might say, names that will not fit on a little box on a birth certificate, but it doesn't matter because they probably didn't have one anyway. So they were born on the 5th of October 1728 in Tonnerre, Burgundy, in France, to Louis Dion de Beaumont, who was a lawyer, later a mayor, and Françoise de Charenton. So Françoise, she was the daughter of the Commissioner General to the Armies of Wars to Spain and Italy. So, they're minor rural nobility. So here's the thing, wealth is relative. So they're rich to regular people. So we would see them as rich, but to the nobility, they would be seen as poor. So being noble, they have a fairly decent sort of way of life. And Dion manages to get a pretty good education. They end up studying in Paris. They're pretty good at languages. And it's noted that they're good at memorizing stuff, which seems appropriate because that's what study is most of the time. It's just memorizing stuff. And so Dion graduates from the Collège Mazarin in law. So they've got a law degree in both civil law and canon law. And they do this at the age of 21. So they know about church law and they know about just regular laws, both. Separation of church and state and ish. So Dion gets a job in public service at the Élie Catherine Fréron's L'année littéraire and writes a book on French government finance, which is all very exciting. So they become secretary to the intendant of Paris. See, I've done it already. I'm slipping into French. The intendant of Paris, Berthier de Sauvigny. And they work in the fiscal department and becomes a royal censor at the age of 30. Basically, they got a job as a censor, which is really nothing to do with law, technically. So the French government, they're like super particular about what books can be published, and they're very intense about it. They have very stringent views about what can and cannot be published. So there's a lot of censoring going on. So Dion gets this really cushy job working for the French government. They're living in Paris, and they're basically reading books for a living. But because of the nature of the job, they're reading books, but they also get like loads of time off to kind of pursue what they want. Like they're having a pretty good time of it, to be honest. You see, France is currently ruled by Louis XV, who was not, by any definition, a super great king. So before him, you had Louis XIV. There's a lot of Louis, right? They're just too many, some might say. The Sun King. And so he had France as the major leading European power. See, there's a reason that for most of history, I say most of history, most of modern history, French was the international language of business. It might still be, but like it was traditionally like the language of business because of how prominent France was in sort of expansion and rule and everything else. So the Sun King reigned and ruled. He was loved by the people, France was prosperous, and under Louis XV, it was not. I mean, in his defence, Louis XV became king at like 5 years old, so I'm not going to blame them for any original issues, because, you know, I believe if you don't have the emotional maturity for losing a crayon, you really shouldn't be blamed for government decisions in your name. Just, you know, that's no reason to elect people who have the emotional maturity or don't have the emotional maturity to losing a crayon. I'm looking at the British government right now. Really, what are you doing? Like, seriously, stop putting these Egypts in charge. Like, what's wrong with you? Anyway, spoiler alert, by the end of Louis XV's reign, sort of 1770s, France has lost its power, its territories, its military is weak, to say the least, and the treasury is considerably drained. Effectively, there's a cost of living crisis going on, and the country is prime for revolution. Now, let's skip back to the 1750s for a wee bit. So France is trying to expand and regain its glory and power. And Louis XV has his grubby wee hands reaching out for Poland. You see, Polish nobles would vote in a king, and had been doing this for a long time. But it had been taken by the Saxons in the late 17th century. Now, Poland at this point is absolutely massive, and all the neighbouring states are eyeing it up. And a bunch of nobles, they want Louis's cousin, Prince de Conti, to be king. That being said, Louis cannot support this officially in any capacity because France is allied with Saxony. And so they kind of rely on each other a wee bit. And so officially, he's like supporting Saxony. But unofficially, the king wants his cousin in. So he wants to eat his cake and have it too. Lol. So he sets up the Secret du Roi, which is the king's secret, a spy network that answers directly to him. So the spies that he ends up collecting, they already have sort of positions or high-ranking positions like within government. So they're going to basically work for him, but use their official cover as, well, their official job as a cover. So it starts small, and then by the time Louis actually dies, there's like 20 fellas in this, 20 people altogether. So, as I said, these spies are already in like relatively prominent positions. So a lot of the time they would receive orders from like the government or from like the ministers, And this would directly contradict orders from the king. So it's kind of complicated. So you're kind of walking a very fine line. And this is going to cause issues because, like, you've got these spies who are in these positions of power and they're undermining government authority. So for them, the rules don't really apply. And it kind of also shows that the king doesn't really have as much power or authority as he did, or he should have, or wants to have. So basically, in order to make the Polish plan happen, they had to strengthen their bonds with Russia. And so the king sends Chevaliere Andrew Peter Mackenzie Douglas. You might be thinking that doesn't sound like the Frenchiest of names, and you would be correct, because he is a Scottish Jacobite working in France. It's not that complicated. Loads of Scottish people ended up working in France. Like, they all just kind of went off there and they all learned French, because why not? They were already multilingual at this point. May as well add another one to the list. So he goes off and Dion accompanies him. Now, the official excuse / reason is to convince Russia not to ally with England in the war that's on the horizon. The unofficial is to promote Conte. So the plan is to go in and sort of bribe a bunch of officials to effectively work together to get Conte promoted. And that's the plan. So effectively, there's this war that's on the horizon. And Prussia, because like this is before Germany is Germany, it's got all these different states. So you've got like Hanover, Prussia, Saxony, etc. So Prussia ends up allying with England and it invades Saxony, who is allied with France, and it basically starts the 7 Years' War. So on one side, context, you have England, Hanover, Prussia, Portugal, Hesse-Kassel, Brunswick. And yeah, that's one side. And on the other side, you have France, Austria, Saxony, Hesse-Darmstadt, Spain, and Sweden. So Russia is on the side of France, like initially, and then it's not. I'll explain. So Dale ends up being like an official secretary to the embassy in St. Petersburg. And, you know, they have to travel like between St. Petersburg and Versailles quite regularly on horseback. Because, you know, you've got no Ryanair deals there. It's not a quick hop, skip and a jump. No. So Empress Elizabeth of Russia and Louis XV are basically pen pals, and they're trying to build relations, and so they're sending these letters back and forth, and they're hidden in a secret compartment in Montesquieu's Spirit of the Laws, which is just like, we're sneakily hiding in a secret compartment in his book, like spy stuff. And this works because this gets the Empress to sign a treaty with France, supporting it and its allies against Prussia. So when the Empress signs this treaty, Dion rushes back to France so fast, they are just hell for leather, that they end up breaking their leg. Don't ask me how exactly they break their leg. Did they fall off a horse? Did they trip out of a carriage? Were they attacked by some angry geese? We don't know. All we know is they broke their leg. So Dion is recognized as an expert on Russian politics, which is handy when the Empress dies in 1762. And the king literally goes to them and asks what to do politically. That shows you how revered Dion is in this position at this point. Now this is also handy because after the Empress Elizabeth's death, Russia ends up switching sides and joins and allies with England in Prussia instead of France. Dion does end up fighting in the 7 Years' War as a captain of the Dragoons. which are basically like the fancy soldiers. And the thing about being a dragoon is you are a dragoon for life. Like that's just a thing. And luckily, Dion wasn't at it for very long. And because you see, Prussia was doing very well for itself. However, France was not. It was losing battles, it was losing territory, and this leads to a few good, prominent people being exiled and banished. There's a movie where someone goes, banished, and that's in my head every time I say banished. So Dion, like their superiors, are exiled. But Dion somehow keeps on landing in shit and coming out smelling of roses. They end up with a promotion. They're appointed the secretary to the Duke de Nivernais, who just happens to be brokering peace with England. Now, the Duke points out like how hard of a worker Dion is. Like they start writing about how they are working from like morning to night. They're taking the job. They're basically not fucking around, right? They land in England in September, and by November, they have this treaty knocked out. And this basically ends the 7 Years' War, because, like, they've got this treaty. However, the Duke himself bloody hates England, and so they recommend that Dion is left in charge until a new ambassador can be put there. So they're like, let me get the heck out of Dodge, I don't want to be here. And let's leave Dion in charge because they know the people, they know what they're doing, and let's get to it. And so they end up being put in as this interim ambassador. And they have effectively unlimited ambassadorial power for a year. Like it takes a year to get an ambassador sent there. And so they have all this power. And it's kind of unchecked, like they kind of have a carte blanche to do whatever the fuck they like. Meanwhile, Conti, the prince, who, Louis was trying to make king of Poland, attempts a coup, which was a terrible, terrible idea. And Louis is just like, no, pal, you're right. So the king's secret, they don't do what they were set out to do, which was put Conti on the Polish throne. Instead, the king's secret get moved to a new plan, which is, I shit you not, invade England. They've just signed a damn peace treaty, and already they're like, this is a good idea. So they end up sending a military officer to go work under Dion and map out the coast and figure out the best points to invade from. And the idea is Dion will write back in super secret spy code and bribe a bunch of people like they did in Russia to basically do all this. And Louis XV literally writes this down. I feel like they're misunderstanding the concept of cloak and dagger here. It's not the smartest of choices to write down, your super secret invasion plans to the country that you've signed a treaty with. So Dion has an actual document from Louis XV, you can spy for me, the King of France, so that France can invade England, the country with which we have signed a treaty and you are staying in. So again, at this point, there's two contradictory orders. Dion is supposed to be building alliances and sort of bonds with England as a French ambassador-ish. And so there's no ambassador. So they're supposed to be doing all of this sneaky spy shit in order to aid the French invasion of England. So at this point, Dion goes back to Paris to receive the Cross of Saint-Louis. It's a medal given by the king to those who showed unusual or exemplary heroism in war. So effectively, they get, a medal for being involved in the 7 Years' War. On the side, it's secretly for being, doing the spy shit, but, officially, it's out there for doing general, dragoon stuff. And this is where they are named the Chevaliere Dion. So Chevalier basically means knight. But yeah, so Dion goes back to London with their shiny new medal. And they're negotiating with England while working against England and writing about French and British political affairs. And they're also socialising a lot in England, doling out wine, gifting lots and lots of wine. Which is an interesting thing to do, considering France is not doing well financially, and Dion is just spending money on wine. The French foreign minister ends up criticising Dion, saying they're just spending too much money. And Dion's just like, how rude of you to treat me like this. Finally, an ambassador is being sent to England, and Dion finds out that they're getting demoted back down to secretary, which results in Dion sending some very angry letters back to France. And they're just like causing such a stink that members of the secret, like their like comrades, are going just like, don't cause a scene, like don't make a big fuss about this. And Dion is like, fuck this for a game of soldiers. And they double down. They're demoted, they are members of the king's secret, but they are very important people. Like the rules don't apply, remember? So they're so used to having honour and power, and then to have this taken from them, they're just simply not happy about the situation. So Dion is stirring the pot and very much causing a scene. But yeah, like again, members of the secret, the king's secret, like they go against the foreign minister so much that this is very much part of the power for them. So when the new ambassador, Gershey, when he arrives, Dion just refuses to leave, going, only the king appointed me, only the king can remove me. And then the king goes, you're removed? You're like, he agrees with his ministers, and he's publicly being like, Dion, get the fuck out of there, mate. What you doing? So the government sides with the king sides with the government, and they try to recall Dion. And Dion is like, no. You see, Dion is really mad because Gershey is notoriously mediocre, so they don't understand why this mediocre, incompetent person is being put in charge. And so Louis, under advice from the head of the secret, is planning to officially strip Dion of titles, but continue paying them on the sly to stay in London as a spy. But Dion doesn't know this, isn't aware of this plan, and basically wants to show them their hand. And so in 1764, they publish secrets, not the king's secret, but it's a 200-page document with correspondence and other info, and it's basically this massive scandal. So the French government charge Dion with libel, and they try to extradite them, they try and get them, but England just goes, no, he hasn't broken any laws, he hasn't done anything, so we're not getting rid of them, that's not happening. Because remember, Dion still has the documents, the official documents signed by the King of France, basically saying, spy for me in England so we can invade them. And the king wants that back. Now, Dion hasn't produced that yet, but they know that they can. So while Dion is charged with libel, there is straight up a plan to kidnap him. And this guy comes forward and says that one of Gershey's men, that he is one of Gershey's men, and that he's part of this plot to kill Dion by the foreign minister and Gershey. So the plan is to drug them, kidnap them, and then murder them. That is the plan. It is very messy because this comes forward and everybody is just shamed. So basically, Dion gets this pretty sweet deal where they get a pension from the King of France, where they also get to like secretly spy for France and England, but the deal is they cannot return to France. And so they're kind of banished, but with pay. And so they stay in England, they stay in London, and it's not the most exciting of times for them. Meanwhile, in paid exile, the Daon publishes 13 volumes on government finance, policy, and taxation. Clearly, they had a lot of time on their hands. They also amassed a collection of like over 6,000 books. Like, I like reading too, but I feel like 6,000 feels a bit excessive. Like, could I read 6,000 books? Maybe. It does feel like a bit much, though. I mean, could I? No, I don't have time. So, not right now anyway. So by the time 1770 rolls around, the new sort of French ambassador in England, he is convinced that Daon is a lady, and they bring this like to the king. So you've got Horace Walpole, who's England's notorious gossip, who has hung out with Daon a couple of times. They've drank wine and whatever. Like, they and their associates are like, yeah, Daon's a chick. What are you talking about? So how this rumour started, we're not entirely sure. However, there is a theory that Daon started it themselves. That being said, it's not easy for Daon once this rumour goes around, because it swirls and churns out so much that bankers and businessmen and like everyone in between are literally betting on which gender Daon is. And it gets so dangerous that Daon is like mobbed in the street with people trying to figure out, like grab their clothes and figure out like, you know, what genitals they have, that they are not safe in London. And one day they just fucking disappear, and their friends are convinced they've been kidnapped or killed. They do return 6 weeks later. They're just like, oh, I was in Germany. I went to Germany for a bit because I was worried for my safety, and then I heard that y'all thought I was missing, so I came back. And they do admit they had considered going to Ireland, the most tolerant of states, and they had considered going to Ireland because nobody knew them there, but they could have gotten away with it. So London is just a bit much by the time they come back, and they are they're closeted at home, they say. They're closeted at home. Because at this point, they're still wearing their dragoon uniform. Like, that's what they wear, because that's, again, you're appointed for life if you're a dragoon. So they're constantly walking around like this, and people are, like, manhandling them to try and find out, you know, is it a P or a V that's going on down there? And so most of the time, they just kind of shut in and don't leave the house. And then one of their pals offers to let them stay in their country estate for a couple months, and they accept, because obviously it's safer for them. Now, the king's advisors send a secretary over to England to find out Daon's gender. To which they say, yes, Daon is definitely a woman. I assessed the situation. I inspected them, and they saw that they were a woman. And the King of France is like, okay. Meanwhile, with all this going on, Daon is asking for the exile to be lifted. But of course they want to keep Daon in England for spy work, and also because like being in France is going to cause some issues because everyone knows who they are. Luckily for Daon though, in 1774, King Louis XV dies, and the 20-year-old Louis XVI is now King of France. So Louis XVI is told about the king's secret, and he's like, what the fuck? Shut it down. What is this? Like, he's of the opinion that, like, the king shouldn't be doing this weird cloak and dagger shit. And so he's like, no, like, done. And now, Louis is also informed that Daon is a woman, and Louis is like, cool, let's give them protection, a pension, remove the exile. but also in exchange for those documents for invading England, because I feel like we shouldn't have those out and about. You know what I mean? Like, maybe let's not have that happening. And the negotiation, it takes a while. It takes a while because there are some very strong personalities in this, and they have again very strong opinions. See, Daon wants it known that Gershi tried to kill them, and they also want to be fully recognised, like officially recognised as a woman. And the king is like, fine, I guess, but you have to live as a woman, so like you have to wear women's clothing, not men's clothing, because like in France as well at this point, it was illegal for women to wear trousers. So it was a whole situation. That being said, dressing as a man when you were a woman, it wasn't seen as unusual because it happened like quite a few times. Like it was a known like thing that happened. So people weren't too surprised by it. So Daon is like, okay, if I'm wearing women's clothing, then I should be allowed to wear like my dragoon uniform because like I've always worn it. And also women's clothing is really uncomfortable. And they're just kind of going back and forth over this. And eventually Daon's like, fine, but you're going to pay for my new wardrobe. And the king's like, grand, let's do this. So meanwhile in England, people are betting so much on gender, right? On the gender of Daon. And it gets to a point where like an official judge declares it illegal to bet on someone's gender. And I think it might still be illegal today, but like they make it illegal. So you can't do that. So by 1777, so like 3 years after Louis becomes king, Daon manages to leave England for France. And they are still in uniform. And again, you've got these gender dressing laws. And so they're told they have to change or get arrested. So like initially they end up in this convent and they're like change into women's clothes and they're like, no. So they end up going to a monastery and staying in this sort of area where like the female relatives of the monks would stay if they were visiting. But again, they're still in their fucking uniform. Now, there's this whole thing about women's clothing, and Daon isn't super into this concept of femininity. Because, like, it's not just about the clothes. It's about control. It's about being a woman is not about the clothes you wear. Like, we always talk about breaking down gender roles, and then, this is my thing about TERFs, right? I fucking hate TERFs, and I will shout it from the rooftops, right? Like, women have fought for years to not be conditioned and forced into these predetermined gender roles, and then you get angry for trans women not like falling within traditional gender roles, like for not adhering to these pretend made up rules. Like, fuck this for a game of soldiers. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's stupid. It's just stupid. You know what? I think now is a good time to go for a message from our sponsors. Good luck.
Have you ever thought about what would happen if your airline window popped out? Or if you can build a jetpack using only machine guns? Turns out you can, but you really shouldn't. Hi, I'm Jill Chacha, host of a podcast that's for weird people who like learning about weird stuff. It's called, well, That's Interesting. And it's a comedy sciencey show that tells the story behind the facts, because as it turns out, those stories are funny. Every Thursday, I tell the tale behind a new, odd discovery, like how researchers found 2 mysterious structures surrounding Earth's core, or how it's actually possible to stop hiccups using a rectal massage. Yes, there's a story behind that, no pun intended, and I tell the story, because storytelling is the perfect way to learn and remember. The facts are bizarre, the stories are epic, and the laughter is plentiful, so join the flock and listen to Well, That's Interesting, wherever you do podcasts.
Everybody shush! William Shatner has something to say.
Cat and Jethro, box of oddities.
What do you do when the woman you love dies?
Well, of course you dig her up and you live with her.
Aww.
The show examines weird things.
There are plenty of old photographs from this time period of children out in the streets playing in and among the dead horse carcasses.
Oh, I miss those days. Things used to be so much simpler.
Cat and Jethro.
Then there's the urine wheel, which sounds like a really bad game show.
Thing done weird things. Cat and Jethro, box of oddities. That is really mysterious.
Join Cat and Jethro Gilligan Toth for the strange, the bizarre, the unexpected, as they lift the lid and cautiously peer inside the Box of Oddities.
The Webby Award-winning Box of Oddities podcast from Airwave Media.
And we are back. So, where were we? That's right, ranting about women's clothing. So basically, Dion is fully aware that it's not the clothing itself, but it's what the clothing represents. Because clothing represents character. And in the eyes of the French law, the French government, and sort of the general populace, by forcing female regalia onto Dion, it would, in a way, subdue them. Like, that is the point. It's to subdue the person. It is to make them less vocal. It's to reduce their power. And female clothing, especially typical female attire, like throughout history, is done in such a way to restrict movement. Like corset, I mean, corset was shapewear, so like that didn't much, but like the giant hoop skirts or like wiggle skirts when they came in, like throughout history, you have, there's nothing wrong with corsets. Corsets are underwear, like it's a support device. But like there are so many items of clothing that exist. Like the reason the reticule became like that wee teeny tiny handbag situation was because pockets were removed from women's clothing. And one of the reasons pockets were removed from women's clothing is because of the French Revolution. So they were worried that people would have pamphlets, and because they would have these massive sort of pockets underneath their skirts. And they didn't want women carrying pamphlets, you know, and it's a whole situation. Anyway, the idea of feminine clothing is that it's going to make Dion docile. And like, not everyone is like happy with this idea of forcing them into women's clothing, even though they're identifying as a woman. So the dragoons are well mad about it because as far as they're concerned, I mean, they're not pushing for female soldiers by any stretch of the imagination, but as far as they're concerned, dragoons are like, it's a lifetime appointment. You are a dragoon for life. And so they're well mad about it because you're basically saying that you can take that from them, even though it's supposed to be a lifetime thing. Like, it's an issue. And then you've got women who are fighting for this because they're going, well, you shouldn't force them into this because just because women are, you know, whatever, they shouldn't be pushed into wearing skirts. And like, there's this whole movement behind it. Eventually, Dion concedes, and Marie Antoinette's wardrobe director is charged with giving them their attire, and the king is paying for it. Because of course they do. Because the king is paying for it, because Dion's like, you're paying me. And so they're getting the best dresser in the fucking country. Like Marie Antoinette's personal wardrobe. Like, this is like all going to be handmade. It's going to be the best of stuff. And the government, I mean, effectively they're trying to restrict Dion's access to the public sphere. They're trying to reduce their power. But Dion is not going to go away like slowly. Like, that's not happening. So at the age of 49, Dion starts wearing female attire in 1777. They are presented to court and they're like hanging out with Marie Antoinette. Like, they're very accepted by Louis. Like, they're doing pretty well for themselves. They're kind of generally accepted in court. And it sort of rebuilds their public standing. Because remember, they were a disgraced spy and now they're a French heroine. Like they've moved through the ranks. And they also change it from Chevalier to Chevaliere. So Chevaliere de Lyon, Dion, sorry, Chevaliere Dion, which is, how do I put this? It's basically, you could have been Chevaliere, it was already a title, but it would be like the wife of a Chevalier, you know? So the nobility's opinion of them, it raises, and they kind of become like, you know, hot stuff. And they're getting invited to like parties, they're kind of going around, they're going to soirees, the newspapers are writing about them. Like, if there's a gossip column, they're in it. You know what I mean? The pamphlets, they're in the pamphlets. So what's interesting about them is like they don't change their mannerisms to conform to the concept of femininity and womanhood. So they're fencing at parties, they're like speaking openly, they're giving opinions, and they poured coffee for the ladies now. Here's the thing, men are supposed to pour their coffee, women are not supposed to pour their own coffee. It's a rule in Rococo France. Don't judge me, I'm just telling you how it is. But they're like, I'm going to pour my coffee. I'm not going to like force myself into this traditional feminine role, regardless of whether I'm a woman or not. Like, it doesn't matter because gender roles are bullshit. So Dion actually ends up meeting Benjamin Franklin, who's getting support for the American War of Independence. So they're like dining together, they're hanging out, and Dion wants to help out in the war. Like they want to be like, I want to support you, I want to help you fight England, like Benny, buddy, like let's get to this. And so they go to the government, and the government's like, no, can you join a nunnery instead? Like, because they're so openly out there and doing this, they really want to start pushing them under the rug. And so they are like trying to force them to go to a nunnery. And Dion does consider this, like they visit some convents, but they don't really vibe with the whole thing because there's not a lot to do in a nunnery. Like it's boring. Like they pray, maybe read a Bible or two, like, and then that's it. So when they're like canvassing like fucking convents, Dion writes to everybody they know to try and convince them to let them join and aid in the War of Independence. Like, they are trying. Eventually, everyone's like, just go back to Burgundy. The king's like, come on, like, go back to Burgundy, chill out a wee bit, have some time to yourself. And I like to imagine that Dion like just puts a hand up to their forehead as if they're about to faint and is like, I am too ill from being bored. Like they're just, I am too sedentary. Basically the idea is that they've been sitting about and doing nothing for so long that like they're just too sick to go. Like, I'm wasting away. Like they just have nothing else to do. So they're too ill to like travel to Burgundy. And it gets to the point where Louis is just so pissed off. He has Dion arrested and imprisoned for 19 days. So Dion compares this to Joan of Arc. It's like, I am so being treated like Joan of Arc, who was also punished for wanting to fight in a war and wearing men's clothing. Which is true. That's actually why Joan of Arc was arrested. She was arrested because she was wearing men's clothing, not for like witchcraft. Like they were like, they caught her on it and they did it sneakily. It was a sneaky thing they did, but that's neither here nor there. So after 19 days, you know, Dion comes out and is like, fine, I will go to Burgundy and I won't wear trousers. And so they go and stay with their mum. And they're there in Burgundy with their mum for the next 6 years. Now, I don't know how their mum felt about this scenario, but I feel like it was not a positive experience for anybody, to be honest. So they do try and leave for England. Dion's like, hey, let me get passage to England, because like I'm just chilling here in Burgundy and I've got nothing to do, and like it would just be a fun little trip for me. And France is like, no, you did try and sell our secrets to them. And I feel like probably not the best idea, because they don't know if they've amassed extra spy stuff. Like they don't know what's happening. They don't want to run that risk. And so 1785, though, they do end up going, and they go ahead to England, and they're there for a couple of years. 4-ish years, I think. And then Dion goes back to France, and when they get there, they are in full support of the French Revolution, even though they themselves are members of the aristocracy. I mean, in fairness, they had been dealt a shift hand by the government, and they just kind of really saw like power to the people as like this really good movement, and they were like super into it. And they end up writing a letter to the National Assembly asking to be reinstated into the army and given a regiment of women to lead into battle for France. Now, the Assembly are like laughing it off a little bit, but also like applauding. So they're kind of supporting it, but also they're not going to do that. They think it's a silly idea, but like they appreciate like the idea of it. Like, you know what I mean? But it's one of those things where like, yes, but no. So the government are just like, no. The National Assembly's like, this ain't happening. So Dion, originally super supporter of like the French Revolution, because they're like, I don't think they really understood where it was going to go. So like, again, big supporter. And then, the aristocracy started being guillotined. Like, Louis loses the head. And once Louis loses his head, Dion loses their pension. So, not really good for them, like, fiscally. And also remembering that they are also a member of the aristocracy and they don't want to lose their head. Needless to say, they return to London, and at this point, they're not exactly a spring chicken. At this point, Dion is she's pretty old at this point. And so she returns to London and ends up signing a deal for like a 10-volume memoir. Like, this is the thing about like back in the day, people would pay by the volume. Like, it was just something you did. You paid by the volume, you didn't pay by the page, the word. It was by the volume. And so they're going to get like a 10-volume memoir about their life. They're going to like work with like their letters and correspondence. And so they start writing it. Now, they write. They don't finish it, but they do write. And the thing about it is as well, is that a lot of this is, how do I put this gently, fictionalized. One, they had a reputation to uphold, and two, again, paid by the volume. So they start discussing their life in a sort of twisted way. So they say that when they were born, that their dad demanded, you remember Louis de Beaumont? Louis de Beaumont demanded a son. And as such, when Dion was born, like they, instead of dressing their daughter in girls' clothing, they dressed their girl in boys' clothing and raised them as a boy. Like that's the story that Dion is going with. But here's the thing. We know that Dion was assigned male at birth because of genitalia. Like that is something that we know. So the way that they tell their life, they don't teach it. They share it in such a way that, they're describing it as, I was told that I was a boy and I was forced to live my life as a boy. I mean, technically, they were told that. But the point is, the story goes, they were born assigned female at birth, but were forced to dress as a boy and live as a boy their whole life in order to, like, get their dad's estate or whatever, and rule and get an education and be a man instead of, I don't know, their dad just shagging more and having more kids. I don't know. Anyway, like, just try for more. Like, that's kind of what you do, isn't it? Yeah, no. Anyway, so, and that they had to have this, like, life as a man until they had the option to, like, live as a woman. And so that's the theory, that's the story. But we know that they were assigned male at birth and that they, realized over time that they were a woman and, put themselves into a position that almost ended their life. It made their life a very difficult one to live. And at any point, having the money they did and the skills that they did, the Chevaliere d'Eon could have easily just switched. If they were not trans, if they were a man, they could have easily just gone back to doing that and again, living in Ireland or somewhere they weren't known, and they could have started a new life. But they chose not to do that. They chose to continue living the life that they lived. And we have portraits of them, and the portraits of them are in sort of the big wigs and the gowns and the cross, the medal, and also the revolution ribbons. They are doing all this stuff. So they're writing their memoirs, but they're not doing well financially. At one point, they end up in a debtor's prison, because they're just running out of money. Because again, they've lost their pension, which they were getting from France and no longer have. So they're in their 70s. Who is oh, you're in their 70s, let's get you to write a 10-volume memoir. That's going to work out, chronologically. It's going to work fine. So they end up selling off their 6,000 book collection. I mean, it's fair. They sell off their books, and they're fencing until physically they cannot fence anymore. They're in their 70s and they're fencing. And it gets to the point where they just stop doing that because, they're just physically not capable anymore. And at one point, she ends up falling down the stairs and becomes paralyzed for about the last 4 years of her life. But for the last 14 years of her life, so she'd been living with Mrs. McCall, who was the widow of a naval officer. So her and Mrs. McCall were sharing an apartment in London. And so for the first 10 years, just general living together. And then for the last 4 years, D'Eon ends up bedridden because of this fall. And her health, it's not great. They're not doing too well. And sort of they're suffering really. To be honest, they're suffering. They're sort of in their late 70s, early 80s. It's not an easy life in, London. And so with the way their health is going, it's no surprise that on the 21st of May, 1810, the Chevaliere d'Eon passes away at the age of 81 in her apartment in London. Now, Mrs. McCall, who lives with her, the widow, is this is her housemate. She wants to get everything ready for her. She wants to make sure she's sorted for burial. And so she wants to get the body ready. And so she's removing the chemise and she's unbuttoning all the stuff. And she gets a shock because as she's unbuttoning it, she's like, OMG, that's a penis. And so she goes to get advice from her friends because as far as she's aware, she's been living with this woman for 14 years. Now, I'm thinking that, they said paralysed, but I'm thinking the Chevalier couldn't have been too bedridden because they didn't need help peeing. So they couldn't have been too bad. I mean, they're bad, yeah, but I feel like they managed to hide that. You know what I mean? They weren't getting chamber pot help. Were they? No, they couldn't have been. They couldn't have been because Mrs. McCall would have noticed the penis by now then, wouldn't she? Yeah. So Mrs. McCall goes to get advice from her friends and they tell her to call on the professionals. And so she does. And approximately 10 to 12 men show up to assess the body, which frankly seems to me like too many men. So we've got a surgeon, a lawyer, a professor of anatomy, a reporter, and apparently a bunch of other fellas who have the appropriate expertise for gandering at genitalia. And maybe some were there for fun, which I hope not, because that's creepy. And so one of them states, like they write an official report and the coroner's like, yes, that's definitely a penis, but also the body has round limbs and remarkably full breasts. I feel like maybe they just gained weight in their old age. I mean, yeah, probably. Yeah, like I've dated men who have busts that are sometimes larger than mine. Like, it happens. You get over it. But I mean, sometimes they look better in my brows than I do. Like, I'm just saying. But anyway, but they're like definitely a dude. That's a penis. So I'm going full out here saying that the Chevaliere Dion, sorry, was a trans woman. And I think we just report how cool that person is, considering they had to transition so late in life as well. Like, major respect for Dion. So here's the thing. Dion is buried at the St. Pancras Old Church in 1813. That means their body was not buried for 3 years. And I'm like, what were they doing with that body for 3 years? I don't appreciate what they were doing. I don't actually really want to know what they were doing because I don't trust anybody with a corpse, to be honest. But so ends our story of the transgender spy for France and member of the King's Secret, the Chevaliere Dion. If you liked my retelling of this story, feel free to rate and review 5 stars. If there's an echo, I did my best to get it out, so we're just going to have to suck it up this week. Don't forget, you can follow me on all the socials, sign up for my newsletter. It's going to be a great time. There's going to be updates. I've got things I need to update to like Patreon as well. Like, I have them here ready to go. I just haven't uploaded them yet, like an absolute arse. But that's that. But of course, we have a recommendation time. So for reading, I am actually going to suggest the Tip in the Velvet by Sarah Waters. I just rebought a copy of it again. So did I recommend that last week? Did I? I don't care. I'm recommending it again. For listening, I'm going to suggest, what am I going to recommend for listening? What have I been listening to this week? I haven't been listening to anything this week. Oh God, what do I like? You know what? Let's go for some nostalgia then. I think everybody should listen to You Spin Me Round by Dead or Alive. It's a good, fun song. It really pumps you up. You should go listen to it. And if you're not going to listen to it, at least watch the Paul Rudd version. It's very funny. And for watching, okay, we all know Bridgerton's coming out this week, and I am going to have a Bridgerton kind of themed special episode coming out later in the week. And I think you're gonna like it. It's got a bisexual mess because it's got our favourite bisexual mess. A very particular lord. A Lord Byron, who is just the definition of bisexual panic, I swear to God. Anyway, with that, I shall bid you adieu. Adios. Au revoir. Auf Wiedersehen, my friends. Bye-bye.